Lauren is an integrative health and life coach and a certified counseling practitioner, and she works to combat misconceptions around expectations that might be leading to shame, unhappiness, or frustration in order to live your best and most authentic life. So, Lauren, welcome. Thank you so much for taking time to be here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited.
Yeah, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us about your background? I know you have a lot of certificates now to add to this introduction that did you know justice for sure. So,
Yes, thank you, Riley. So yes, hi everybody. Thank you so much for joining. So my name is Lauren Deitch, and like Riley said in the introduction, I am a certified integrative health and life coach, as well as a certified counseling practitioner. I am recently retired from being an educator in the state of Colorado. So I taught for 7 years in public school, eighth grade English, and it was very rewarding and very fun. But through my own personal journey with health and weight and wellness, it really pulled on my heart calling to kind of expand that teaching past teaching middle schoolers how to wear deodorant, social skills, and English to teaching people how to live a more wellness rich life and feel more comfortable in their own skin.
yeah, that's amazing. And that's what got us here to talking about women in shame and societal expectations.
Yeah, absolutely. It was such a huge part of my discovery with health and wellness and my ultimate journey to living a more healthier, happier, authentic life. And when I really kind of dug into it, especially with some of the clients that I have, I mean, shame is one of those core concepts that I don't even think that most women recognize is subconsciously driving so many of their decisions.
Do you find this common among a lot of your friends or and clients? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think with friends, it's really easy to kind of have conversations if you know how to probe the right questions. Because a lot of the time, a friend might be complaining or venting about their spouse or about their job or about their weight. And as a friend, you want to support them, affirm their feelings and kind of be there for them. But when you probe and ask the questions, it's not about the weight, it's not about the dishes not getting done by your spouse. It's about these core different concepts of I'm not enough. And I'm afraid that that's going to be uncovered and I'm going to be seen and not loved for it.
Personally believe Sophia Health platform itself is, when we say health and wellness, and people are trying to understand why we have life coaches and health coaches. And I think it's because fundamentally, these core concepts like shame could be causing these self destructive behaviors, which is why I'm so thankful that you came on here today to talk about this. Because when we don't recognize these issues, we have these behaviors that become destructive in some way, and then that's not good for your health, and that's what causes this vicious cycle and ends up in not good places. So being able to have our clients connect to coaches like yourself is helping thousands of people, and we're so appreciative.
Thank you.
Okay, let's just jump into some of these questions because I'm excited. The first question is, what is shame?
Okay, so I absolutely love Brene Brown's definition of shame, which she defines as an intensely painful feeling expressed in believing that we are flawed and therefore unworthy of love and belonging. So to me, AKA in simplistic terms, that's I'm unlovable, I'm unworthy, I'm not enough. And so when we look at shame, especially when I'm working with my clients, I really try to get them to break it down to where are they feeling that I'm not worthy, I'm not enough, I'm unlovable.
Where does that come from?
So I think that shame can come from a lot of stuff. I mean, like, there's so many different psychological pieces that you can look at. I mean, like, is there childhood trauma? Are we coming from a divorced or broken home? But I also think a lot of that is coming from gender norms, social media, and just general marketing in the way that women are being told that they're not enough. You don't look like this. Here's a product to make you look like this. Or, you should be doing this with your spouse if you want to have this idyllic looking marriage. You should act this way with your in laws if you want to be seen as a respectable wife. so on and so forth.
Well, that's stressful just hearing that, to be honest. That's a lot of perfection to put into a day. That's just sounds exhausting. Am I subconsciously living with shame? What does this look like when I'm unaware?
Yes, I think the simple answer is yes. On some level, we're all living with some subconscious, unnoticed little seed of shame. I think with what does this look like, it can manifest in a lot of ways. I think some of the really simple ways to kind of self examine that is ask yourself, what are you in conflict with about right now? So if you're dissatisfied with a relationship with a colleague in your work, what is it about that relationship that's bothering you so much? So, like, for example, if that colleague isn't doing something the way that you would do it yourself, okay, let's flip that on your head. Like, why does it need to be done in the way that you're telling them or the way that you perceive it to be done? So, if it has to be done in a certain way, what happens if it's not done that way? What does it mean if it's not done in that way? And so when you really ladder it down, you're going to get to some kind of limiting belief statement that's around, I'm not good enough, I'm going to get fired. It's some kind of fear based limiting belief statement that really, if you're working with a coach or counselor or a psychologist or different things like that, they can help you pinpoint that feeling of shame. And I think even just recognizing when you're going through that practice of like, where are you feeling it in the body? Like, is it a tightness in your chest? Are you feeling like the really nasty nervousness in your belly? Are your shoulders really scrunched up? That kind of stuff.
Do you think when we subconsciously see these ads, because you mentioned the social media earlier, do you think this is having a lot? Do you think we're consciously aware of this marketing? Or do you think this is like we're unaware that we're actually seeing all these things that we're supposed to be doing?
Yeah, I think that we're consciously aware that we're comparing ourselves to these images or these perceptions or these notions of what we should look like. Because should is a dangerous word, right? It's the judgment and comparison when we're using that word. So I think, yes, consciously we're aware of we're judging ourselves or comparing ourselves to this picture that we've seen on social media, this image we've seen on Pinterest, this beautiful magazine cover, whatever it might be. I do not think that most people naturally think, oh, that's shame. Oh, that's a limiting belief.
Absolutely not. Do you think the type A perfectionism is that a masquerade or a compensation for hiding shame?
Absolutely. So as a in recovery perfectionist and type A personality myself, I 100% would say that that type of mindset is masquerading or hiding some feeling of I'm unworthy or I'm not enough or I'm unlovable. So, because when you look at it, I mean, perfectionism in type A is about control, really, trying to control the uncontrollable, whether it's making sure that you have all control in the projects at your work, making sure that your children in your home are all in place when you have friends or family over for entertaining. This illusion of control puts out a facade of I have my life together. There's nothing you can negatively judge me against because look at all of the different ways that I'm proving to you that I can do my job well, that I am on time, that I look the part, that I act the part. When we are creating these type A personalities and this like idea of perfectionism, whether that's coming from that social media gender norm mentality or if we're just naturally that way and it's just a part of our personality, I think it's really important to look at what are you afraid of if somebody comes to your home and there are dishes in the sink. What does that say about you? What are you afraid of if your child shows up to school with the lunch you forgot to pack? Or what are you afraid of as a judgment that somebody is going to say about you? And is that true or is it false? Okay, so I'm assuming that they're talking about feeling ashamed because of their weight or the way that they're perceiving their body, or feeling ashamed because of mothering now that their children are at home because of the pandemic when all the schools closed, or feeling ashamed about prioritizing their health. So like let's break this down into 3 categories. So we'll start with weight and body image just because it's similar to what we've already discussed. As women, we're always and constantly comparing ourselves to somebody else. So whether that's an image, a friend, a family member, whatever it is, we are constantly trying to improve our appearance with makeup, hair color, clothes, editing on social media, whatever it is, we're constantly comparing ourselves. It's very rare that you find somebody who is so comfortably, authentically living in their skin without fear of judgment or repercussion. So I think when we're talking about, if I was working with a client who is coming to me about losing weight or being dissatisfied with their body image, we need to get down to those limiting beliefs because those limiting beliefs are what's holding them back. So if I have a client who comes to me and is like, I've always been overweight and I'm going to continue to be overweight, I never can lose weight, diets don't work. Okay, well, all of those are limiting beliefs, but really it's justification for why they're not enough. And so when we flip that and we're like, okay, let's rewrite those statements
Yeah.
as empowering statements instead of limiting beliefs. I can lose weight. A different nutrition plan will work for me. I love my body and the things that it's done, bringing this child into this world or getting me to be age 45 successfully, whatever it might be. And so rewriting that narrative because those limiting beliefs are really just embodying those shame reasoning behind why they can't do that. And then I think so like the second example that they brought up was about mom guilt essentially, and then having children at home. So I've had a lot of clients just in, pandemic living come to me feeling so overwhelmed with adapting to having their children at home. And a lot of that is I'm not doing enough. I'm not mothering enough. I'm not helping my children enough. I'm not providing enough. I'm not doing this. And then really we're getting the other piece, which is I'm overwhelmed. I don't have any time for myself. I'm trying to run a career or I'm trying to be a stay at home mom. I'm trying to be a good spouse, a good significant other, whatever it might be. And I'm failing at all of those things. And if I'm failing, I'm not lovable. I'm not worthy. I'm not enough. And so, again, when we look at those limiting beliefs and we flip it on its head, it's like, okay, are you really not enough? Or is this you're in a situation that you never thought you'd be in? You are at home trying to do the best that you can in an uncertain world. And are your babies happy? Are your babies healthy? Are they laughing? Great. Well, then let's start there. Let's start with positives because you're their mother. So rewriting those things because we get so quick to like get into this shame spiral with those limiting beliefs. And then I think the third point that they were asking about is like prioritizing. So whether it's weight loss, mothering, I mean, realistically, the shame of who is going to pay the price if I take time to take care of myself is huge because as women, we naturally are caretakers, we nurture, and we feel called to take care of everybody around us, whether it's our family, our friends, our colleagues, whatever it is. We're naturally gifted in that way. And I think when we want to lose weight, prioritize our health, or just create a better life for ourselves, we feel guilty. I'm going to lose time with my friends, or I'm going to lose time with my children if I spend 30 minutes working out, or we look at what we're losing. So again, it's those limiting beliefs showing up. But really, if we rewrite that narrative, well, no, I'm gaining more time with my children because I'm going to have more energy and I'm going to be happier when I'm spending that time around them. So when we choose to rewrite those limiting beliefs that are based in shame into empowering statements that really refocus our narrative, it's such a great way to rewrite and flip that shame spiral into a more positive mindset.
If it's as easy as a limiting belief and a mindset, why do we get into these spirals?
Okay, so instinctually, I didn't know about it. Like just going through life, I had no idea. I just called it anxiety. That's just the way life was. deal with it, put your big girl pants on, move past it, like whatever it is. Life, I was choosing to live life so fast that I wasn't even aware that that's what was going on. I was so overwhelmed with trying to have a successful teaching career, trying to be a good wife, trying to be a good daughter, whatever it might be, that I didn't even recognize that it was overflowing into all these things. So, for example, if I got into an argument with my husband about not doing the dishes in the sink that evening, it wasn't about the dishes. It was about my inability to ask for help because I needed to do it all. And if I didn't do it all, then I'm a terrible wife. And if I'm a terrible wife, I'm unlovable and my husband will leave me. Like, even just saying it out loud just sounds so ludicrous, but we don't take the time to slow down the thoughts and the speak that's going on in our brain and in our own thoughts. And I think that's why it's so powerful to work with coaches or even just build a community and a conversation with your friends and your family members and just different individuals that you do feel safe to be vulnerable with. Because if we're constantly creating this narrative of I have to be perfect or I have to be X, Y, or Z, we're never going to give ourselves the grace to actually uncover what's going on.
What are some tools to manage unrealistic expectations?
I love this question. So, whoever asked it, I love it because I think just the number one tool I would say is writing down, pen to paper, write down the expectations because more than likely they're gonna make you kind of think about it. So, I'll give you a perfect example. When my husband and I first got married, I had this expectation that I had to host holidays and I had to incorporate all of the things. I had to cook everything from scratch. All of the decorations had to be beautiful. I had to have beautiful guest rooms arranged and board games and activities planned to accommodate everybody. It was so ludicrous when I wrote it down because I was like, okay, let me just ask my husband, does he expect that of me? The answer was no. So then I was like, okay, where is this expectation coming from? Is it coming from my in laws? Absolutely not. Is it coming from my family of origin? Absolutely not. And then I was like, okay, well, where is it coming from?
Interest.
You know what I mean? It's Pinterest, it's whatever it is. And it's like, it's coming from that driving force of, I want to feel loved. I want to feel accepted. I want to feel valued. And it's the illusion of if I can make it look like that, you will love me. And so when I really put those expectations out on paper and then had dialogues with the people who were involved in that, whether that dialogue was with myself, my spouse, my family members, whoever, my colleagues, it really posed the question of where are these expectations coming from? So when we're talking about managing those expectations, I think just writing them down for whatever the appropriate season is. I would never recommend to a client to write down all of the expectations because it's just going to be an entire notebook full of expectations and be extremely daunting. But looking at what's in front of them. So, like, we're in the summer of post pandemic living. Some states are now locked down again, some aren't. Okay, what are your expectations for July? Is it getting outside with your children? Is it having virtual family nights? Is it cooking more meals at home? Is it choosing to work out? Whatever it is, but then asking yourself why. Those three letters, right? WHY. Why is that expectation there? And then probing the next question of, is this beneficial to me? Or is this going to cause me more anxiety? Because if it's going to cause you more anxiety, then that needs to be marked from your list. Because if the question's around how do I manage those expectations, you need to make sure that they're positively benefiting your life. Because if they're not, they got to go or they got to be rewritten.
Are there any other tools that we can use or that you use as a coach besides writing it down and identifying it?
Yes, absolutely. So I think just talking them out. So again, you guys can always choose to work with a coach, a counselor, therapist, whatever it is. But I think like start with what's free. Talk those situations out with people. A lot of the time, especially women, you're going to talk with women that agree with you, right? Like we're friends and associate with people who have similar values as us. So, if my expectation is that my house is clean anytime somebody comes over, more than likely your circle of friends have that same expectation. And so I almost would pose the question of like, okay, but realistically, how reasonable is that? Does it cause you a ton of stress? Does it take hours out of your day preparing for people to come over? Like, how does that make you feel? So just probing those questions around feelings, because again, we're so stuck in our head that it's like, oh man, like I just really wish somebody would have come to me as a friend or whoever and just been like, okay, but like sit with that. Like, how does it feel? Do you open to that idea or do you constrict to it, that expectation? So I think talking to people, writing it out, I think also looking at resources. So culture forms so many of our expectations. So whether that's our family of origin, religion, the city, the state we live in, looking at what some of those are and then asking yourself, do I agree with those? I don't think that many people give themselves permission to disagree because society, more times than not, tells us we're deviant if we disagree with an ideology or an expectation of what's normal. Well, what's normal for me may not be normal for my friend, and what's normal for me may not be normal for a colleague. We have so many other things that build up who we are and the types of lives that we want to build. And it's almost I'm trying to think of the right word for this. It's really sad when we think about it. We're letting societal expectations create a life that we're not even in charge of. So that's kind of an empowering statement when you flip it and you're like, I want to create my life on my terms.
How you just laid that out was amazing. I think that was beautiful how you summed that up. Are you living with limiting beliefs?
So I think most people don't recognize that they're living with limiting beliefs. Again, it just goes back to that narrative of this is just the way it is. I constantly catch myself saying things like, this is just the way it is. There's no other way. And so I think when we get stuck using the word should or have to, that's a pretty good way to catch ourselves first. So I think more people don't recognize that they're limiting beliefs. It's becoming more common language, especially in the wellness world. But when we talk about mainstream, I mean, you're not going to go to your regular practitioner and they're going to be like, hey, I understand that you want to lose weight, but is that maybe a limiting belief on why you can't? Like, that's not usually the conversation that you have. And so I think just asking yourself, okay, where is this showing up? Am I using shoulds a lot or have tos? I have to get this done today. Okay, well, what happens if you don't?
Right.
Like, you know what I mean? I think when we really get down to it, we're the ones writing the narrative, right? Because our own thoughts is the constant narrative that's driving every decision in our life. And of course, it would be ignorant to not acknowledge that there's societal influences, gender norms, and all of the other things that make up the construct of who we are as a person. But I think absolutely these expectations are coming from ourselves. We are putting these expectations on ourselves in order to make sure that we are perceived as lovable and perceived as worthy. And so when we acknowledge that I'm the one that's writing this narrative and I'm the one that's responsible for the anxiety, it's scary for some people because it's easier to blame and it's easier to tell ourselves that, well, if my boss was different, then it would be this, or, if I had more time, then I could do that, or whatever it is. But when we really sit, we say to ourselves, I'm choosing to manage my time this way. I'm choosing to participate in this expectation. I'm choosing to do X, Y, and Z. It's also very freeing because then the answer is, I can choose to do differently.
Which can be scary when you're talking about societal norms. They're different than your friends may be doing or your family or what they may or may not even expect, right?
Yes.
How can we prime ourselves to not have more expectations than warranted in order to prevent unnecessary disappointment?
Okay, wonderful. Okay, so I think really getting down to manageable terms. Because again, if you just ask somebody like, okay, what are all of the expectations you have, that's daunting and super overwhelming. But if you break it down into, okay, what are the expectations that I'm dealing with in this season of life? So whether that's becoming a new parent, whether that's losing a job because of the pandemic, whether that's creating healthier habits around eating, whatever the situation of the season is, start there and list out your expectations or talk out your expectations. And then ask yourselves again, okay, which one of these can wait? Like what is the number one thing that's driving it? So just kind of reprioritizing those and then reformulating a game plan to empower you on creating next steps.
So the best exposure for shame is being vulnerable. What are some daily practices to practice vulnerability?
Okay. So I know that most of us are not going to like to hear this because even I still struggle with this, asking for help. I mean, even in the simplest way, not knowing how to do something doesn't make you unlovable. If anything, being vulnerable, it allows people to lean in. It allows people to care and show to you that they care about you and that they love you and that they value you because you're giving them an opportunity to do that. It's ironic when you think about it because when we're constantly putting up this facade of I can do it all and I can do everything, we're robbing the loved ones in our lives and these people who are meaningful in our day to day interactions opportunities to actually show us what we're asking for. So I think number one would be asking for help.
That's a really good one. Can you think of any others? Because you mentioned in the beginning, and I said those were two great words. You mentioned vulnerability and grace.
Yes. Okay. So I think with the grace statement, allowing yourself the freedom to not put so much weight on the to do list or the to done list or whatever your checklist is for the day. If you don't answer that email right when it comes in on your cell phone, is it going to be that bad if it waits for 30 minutes? Is it going to be the end of the world if you don't mop the floor? Is it going to be that terrible if you wait another hour to walk the dog? Whatever it is, asking yourselves, is this really that time sensitive? Because who's going to pay the price? If you're constantly stressed out, your energy's depleted, and you're in this constant state of prove, anxiety, and all sorts of other emotions, you're not showing up as your best self to answer that email. You're not going to be cleaning your house the way you hoped it to be because you just want it to be done.
If we're busting through these limiting beliefs and we're really renegotiating these expectations with ourselves, how would you reframe and how would you set these healthy boundaries for yourself so you don't have these?
Okay, great question. I think really getting honest with ourselves. Like we have to allow ourselves the space to really ask, what is the life that I'm trying to build? What are my priorities? One of the gifts that I think that pandemic living has afforded more people is the loss of distraction. And with the loss of distraction, it really prioritizes like what matters. Are you healthy? Are you safe? Different things like that. And I think when we allow ourselves the time to sit and really feel into, okay, what do I want my relationship with so and so to look like? What do I want my income to look like? What do I want my body to feel like? Whatever it is, more than likely your inner dialogue's waiting to tell you. But with all of the distractions of the to-do list, the emails, the job, the family, whatever it is that we're using as an excuse to prioritize over that self time, we really can lean into what we want. So whether that's writing it down or just sitting and thinking about it. I mean, a lot of people don't have the time realistically to sit down and actually go through and journal and free write and do all of these things. That might work for somebody, but it might not work for another person. So just sitting, maybe even on your way home from whatever commute you're making, and just asking yourself, what do I really want? How do I want to feel? That's a big difference on that question. What do I want and how do I want to feel?
How could you take that and then set healthy boundaries?
So Boundary setting to me, put simply, I'll explain it. When we look at boundary lines, there are a ton of ways that we can identify a boundary. So maybe there's a sign, maybe there's a yard, maybe there's a picket fence, maybe there's an electric fence, or maybe there's a brick, mortar, stone hedge, and all sorts of things. Well, it's the same with people. Most of the time, we don't communicate or even know what our boundaries are until somebody violates them. And I think a perfect example of that is if I'm out on a hike with my dog and I'm on a trail and all of a sudden I'm now on somebody's private property, I don't know that unless it's properly defined with the boundary line, whether that's a sign, a fence, whatever. So, when we're talking about defining boundaries with people in our relationships with the world, we need to decide what that boundary looks like. Is it a yard? Is it a yard with a fence? Can we see through the fence? Can we not see over it because it's a stone wall? And I think that those boundary lines are different for tons of different situations. I think so. A lot of women who especially come from backgrounds of childhood trauma, they tend to have huge walls made of stone and everything is a boundary. Like, no, it's such a violation. When really it's, oh, is it? Like, could I just maybe have like a shorter wall or maybe like a fence where you can see and it's open, or there's a gate and I get to choose when people get to get past that boundary line. But I think just kind of looking at establishing boundaries as what they are, which is simply just letting people know what you're okay with and what you're not okay with. And once you decide what that looks like for that particular situation, communicate it. We so live in this world of assumptions of like, oh, people can read my mind. They should know me. They should know this. And again, that word should is where we really get caught up on these limiting beliefs. Just let people know in a loving way. If anything, it's going to be received a lot better letting them know ahead of time. Hey, I'm unavailable from this time to this time. Hey, I don't want to do the holidays this way. Let's do it this way. Hey, I need X amount of time a week to myself. Whatever the boundary is, just communicating it. And there's no need to justify it. I think so much of us, when we get into justifying, I need this time a week to do X, Y, and Z. Okay, well, now we're back into that shame mindset of I have to prove that I'm lovable. I have to prove that I need this. When you don't need to justify it, all you need to do is just let people know, because just like on a hike, the sign tells me I can't go there. Okay, I can't go there. I think communicating it, but also like asking yourself, is this a real boundary line for me? Or is this a boundary line I feel like I've been told that I need?
How can we live authentically?
Okay. So hashtag authentic is like this big thing right now. So living authentically, and what does that mean? And we all have different ideas of what that means. And I think what's so interesting about the word authentic is just like how it can be defined in many different ways, it's individualized. So I think asking yourself, okay, what does authentic mean to you? And then once you have that established, start creating the boundaries to help you create that authentic life that you're trying to create. When you're allowing people to come in, or social media or other influences to tell you what you should be doing, then you're in conflict with what's authentic to how you want to be living.
Oh, that makes sense. So basically, what you're saying is write down the narrative that you want for your life and live true to that narrative, and don't let these other societal expectations change your narrative and change who you are.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it sounds simple, right? But I mean, really, it's a lot of consistent hard work. I mean, just like with anything, it takes repetition over time. But I think when we're really clear, it just solidifies that commitment and it makes it a little bit easier. And I think one other little tidbit I would give to that is feelings. Like, how do I feel when I'm authentically living? How do I feel when I'm not authentically living? Because if we don't have that constant narrative going on in our head, which we won't, life is going to happen. The baby's going to be screaming. I'm going to be stuck in traffic. somebody's going to be yelling at me, whatever it is, that feeling of like, okay, am I actually like living authentically in this situation, or am I out of alignment with how I would hope to be reacting to the world?
That's a really good one. How can we reframe our feelings of shame surrounding perceived failures? And this example is successfully breastfeeding, failure to conceive naturally, failure to be married with kids, or failure to, quote, have it all.
Yes. Okay. So my first, if this was a client that I was working with and they came to me with that narrative, my first thing would be, who's telling you that that is the way that it is? Because we put so much pressure on ourselves to be lovable and be successful and have this appearance of having it all, or meeting all of these expectations of what a woman should do, should be, should look like, should. So I think that just questioning the why behind those statements. But I think the bigger piece to that is we have to be willing to say, I'm worthy. Like we have to start creating this mindset and this new narrative of I'm lovable, I'm worthy. And then also just reframing it and like, that's your relationship with your child. That's your relationship with your body. It's your journey. No other woman on this planet has lived your journey, your life. Nobody is one size fits all. And I think as women, we're constantly comparing and we lose track of the fact that this woman's life is not my life. I don't know her background. I don't know what challenges she's faced. And I also don't know what shame issues she's dealing with. But one thing that does unite us is that we are all dealing with things. We all feel unlovable at some point for some reason. And that's really empowering when we think about it, because we can show up as a community. We can show up and reassure and affirm these people, not just women, but these people in our life that no, you are enough and you are worthy and you are doing the best that you can in this situation, be it breastfeeding, raising your children, conceiving, whatever it is.
Lauren, that's an amazing answer. Interesting enough, this question is around self forgiveness. And I think that ties in really well with this. How can we best practice self forgiveness?
So I think acknowledging that it's very difficult. I mean, like there's almost in the wellness community, if you know any of our viewers are thinking about it from the wellness perspective, there's almost like this image that we all have in our mind of forgiveness and zen and oneness or whatever it might be. And really, self-forgiveness is hard. It's really difficult. I think just acknowledging that that's hard, so granting yourself permission to feel the feelings associated with what does it mean to forgive myself? For some of us, it might mean accepting blame. And if we're blaming ourselves for something, then we're creating that shame cycle. And so I think acknowledging the feelings that we feel. So whatever it is, allow ourselves to feel it. Blame, guilt, shame, fear, anger, whatever it is. But then we have to move past it. Acknowledge the feelings when they're there, and now let's move past it. The way to move past that is I'm enough, or reminding yourself that wherever you are in life, you successfully made it. You are at that place in life, which is further along than you might have been yesterday, 10 years ago, whatever it is. You're there. Like you did it. Give yourself permission to be like, okay, like that sucked, or I messed up, or whatever it is. And grant yourself forgiveness by telling yourself, you know what, like I love you and it's going to be okay. You will figure it out. Let's start again, start a new route, create a new path. It really does come down to that giving ourselves permission to feel worthy and lovable.
Giving yourself some grace to
Yes.
make mistakes and be loved. I told you I love those two words you brought up, being vulnerable and having grace. Are there tools or tips to help me with the self forgiveness?
Start with the free stuff first. There is tons of information on the internet. You can get books from the library, just researching what it is that you're specifically looking for. I think the second one is ask for help. So whether that's through free resources, your community of friends and family, different support groups for whatever specific situation that you're dealing with, or, hiring somebody, whatever that might be. So when it comes to resources, look for the things that are free, but also be really specific. There's a lot of literature on shame, boundaries, expectations, but be specific for what you're looking for. Are you looking for how to set boundaries in your marriage? Are you looking for how to feel empowered in your job? Are you looking for how to have a more positive relationship with food? Whatever it is, like really hone in on what you're looking for, because otherwise you're in this vast sea of never ending information.
Yeah, and interesting enough, that's how Sophia Health was set up, right? We have these categories from the client side come in and say, what do I specifically need help with? And then find different tools available to help you. So we have all those categories that you just mentioned. So thank you. That was awesome.
Yes.
Do you have any last tips or closing thoughts for us?
Yes. I think when we're talking about expectations, boundary settings, and just acknowledging that we're living with shame, the empowering piece that I would hope that I leave people with is that you're in charge of that narrative. It's a loving relationship that you're creating. Setting boundaries doesn't make you cold, it doesn't make you harsh, doesn't make you aggressive. All of these words that we tell ourselves. Setting boundaries allows you to have a more meaningful, loving relationship with people that you cherish in your life. Really reevaluating these expectations, it allows you to free yourself from the things that you think you should be doing versus the things that you actually care about. When we acknowledge that we're constantly driving this narrative of I'm not lovable and I'm not good enough, it allows us the empowering thought of, is it really about the dishes in the sink, or am I just afraid right now because I'm in conflict? So it grants us permission to really lean in to creating more positive relationships, not just with others, but with ourselves.
That's amazing.
To end on a positive note, I mean, I either read it or I heard it somewhere, but somebody once told me that we're shoulding all over the place. And so it's kind of like when we think about that, like in comparison to what it sounds like, I mean, like that really is, we don't want to live our lives that way. So it's an easy way for us to catch ourselves where it's like, oh no, I'm shitting all over the place.
Thank you so much for spending your Friday afternoon with us. You can find Lauren on Sophia Health.
Thank you guys for having me.